All right, folks, you're very welcome back to the programme. It's Ralph McLean with you, and for the next hour, I'm in the company of Ian Astbury of The Cult, looking back on a musical life less ordinary. Some truly great music to share. Ian and Billy and the boys back as Death Cult in Belfast next Monday night in the Telegraph Building. It's going to be immense, and we have so much to talk about. We'll start with a true classic from that early period of The Cult, though. She Sells Sanctuary. And inevitably enough, I started by asking him how things were going on the tour.
Good. I mean, we're in the middle of it now. It takes a couple of weeks to get settled on the road, but we're pretty settled into the shows.
How many dates have you had so far then? How many dates have you got under your belt?
Eight shows on this run, about 25 on a previous run. And then all in, it'll be about 50 shows. 50 plus shows this year.
That doesn't take anything out of you, Ian. That's pretty standard, is it? Is that kind of standard rates?
Hey, when we were kids, we were going out and doing 150, 180, 200 shows a year.
Wow.
And that was brutal.
That is brutal. That's a brutal. But at least you've eased off a bit on that then. So 50 or so is not too bad.
Yeah, a lot of it's the road travel. A lot of it's the actual unpacking, road travel. There's quite a to do.
What's any tips for surviving on the road, Ian? What have you learnt through the decades? Is there any sort of neat little cheats and little tricks to get through the horror of dull, travelling and all that horrible side of touring? What's the trick?
Sleep, water, and therapy.
So stay hydrated, get a bit of therapy, and make sure you get your kip. I take it you didn't do an awful lot of that in your younger days, really? There wouldn't have been an awful lot of sleep going on tours?
Of course not. Yeah. I used to go for 5 days and then fall asleep for 2 days.
5 days on, 2 days off, absolutely. Listen, we're really looking forward to seeing you in Belfast for Death Cult, and this has taken you right back in, this whole project, this whole idea. Why did it feel like the right time now to kind of revisit your earliest days with the cult, with Death Cult? Why did now feel right to kind of dive into this era?
Well, it's a natural cycle. It's been 4 decades. So that was one aspect. Another aspect was Under the Midnight Sun, our previous record that we released in October last year. We've been touring that for over a year. And we always kind of plan ahead. It's like what we're going to do next. And mixing current recordings with, to get from A to B to do another current recording, we like to do something in between. So we've done a few thematic things. We did we did Love Live, we did Electric 13, we did Acknowledge Sonic Temple, but we're not a great nostalgist band in any way, shape, or form. So I feel there's something in the DNA of Death Cult, especially in this moment, that there's a lot of parallels between the post-punk scene, socially, politically, psycho-spiritually. There's a lot of themes, and there's a lot of archetypal themes within Death Cult and Southern Death Cult that have woven their way through the cult over the decades. So in many ways it's a way of acknowledging that, and it puts us back into a 4-piece situation where the connectivity between musicians is we're very intimately connected as we're performing these songs. We really came out as a performance band when we were kids. We came out of punk, post-punk, new wave, etc., dark wave. I like to refer to it as Gothic futurism.
Yeah, that's nice. Gothic futurism. I like that, Ian.
Well, that came from MLZ, who was an American graffiti artist in New York, and he came up at the same time as Jean-Michel Basquiat, and he was a contemporary of Basquiat. He was a contemporary of Keith Haring, and his vision was that the subway graffiti writers were the monks, because in the medieval period, the monks were the ones that wrote down the word. So they were like, they were kind of a sect unto themselves. They had a skill set. They were erudite. They knew how to write. They had, incredible penmanship. And of course, those that were unable to do that, there was a great envy towards the monks. So he thought that the graffiti writers had a special codex, if you will, of putting down these, symbols, graffiti statements. And that was something that was really profound to me. I thought Gothic futurism, and the concept of Gothic futurism, he was also mixing it with science fiction ideas. He would build costumes. He had many, many different personas, and he created these incredible personas that almost look like Transformers, but there's more like a samurai / transformer. So he didn't identify as a person. He identified as a cipher, and he was trying to communicate on a different frequency. And that's really interesting because he was disrupting normal parlance. We weren't. So, and I found that to be really fascinating. Plus, I do actually love his work, and he kind of came around again about 10 years ago. He passed away, and the estate came over, and Jeffrey Deutsch, who's a pretty famous American impresario in the art world, did a recent exhibition of MLZ, and I was referencing Gothic futurism as a concept, because when you consider 1983 and going into 1984, we're in this moment where we're approaching the 21st century. George Orwell's 1984 was obviously in everyone's minds, dystopia, collectivism. We could begin to see a society that was forming based around technology, based around media, and of course we went to Los Angeles in 1984 very early on, and that year was Ridley Scott's first commercial for Apple computers. So that was a pretty significant moment, and in many ways year zero was 1984. It was almost like the prelude to 21st century. So things were shifting. Artists were using more electronic instruments. There's a shift into technology being part of our organic processes. And of course, it started in the 70s and the late 60s, but that wasn't widely available. Bands like Joy Division, for example, what Mark Hanna was doing, what those guys were exploring with like ARP Harmony 2s and, various, using technology to their advantage to kind of enhance the more traditional music they were writing. So for us, that was a real key moment. And Death Cult at the time was, a way to get from Southern Death Cult to the Cult in terms of moniker. But the more I look back at it now, I go like, oh, wait a minute. Death Cult was actually very reflective of what was happening around us. The idea of impermanence. I mean, somebody said to me recently, what is Death Cult? And I said, it's impermanence, from a Buddhist concept of the fact we all know that we're going to pass. We don't know what day or conditions that's going to occur on, but we have a very finite life. So we're in this industrial, technological world that we live in, which is brutal at times. And to be a human within a sentient human being within all of that, it's very challenging. So, of course, I go to philosophy, Tibetan Buddhism, indigenous cultures, psychedelics, new sciences, quantum physics, and it all plays into that. And I was very interested in that.
You've always been a seeker, Ian, haven't you? I mean, you've always been interested in what's been happening around you. And like you rightly say, there's something very contemporary about Death Cult. It does feel like music that could arrive today, and that's interesting, because some bands will go back and look at something from 82, 83, and it'll be a time capsule thing, won't it? It'll be a nostalgia trip. This sounds pretty contemporary. This sounds kind of bang on the money at the minute. I mean, that punk culture, you mentioned Joy Division. I know Joy Division were a huge touchstone for you, Ian, weren't they, in terms of what the band represented and what they represented to you. Take me back to that period, for anybody listening to this, perhaps too young to remember the punk wars. Take me back to what it was like, because it was kind of a bleak period, wasn't it, as well? It was a tough time to be young.
It was incredibly bleak. It was incredibly bleak. There was like no future was one of the Jamie Reid and Malcolm McLaren came up with no future, destination, nowhere, boredom.
Real nihilism, wasn't it? It was really, really stark and kind of grim to be a youth, and to have no future, for example. Those two words, it's frightening, isn't it? No future,
Yeah. It didn't seem like the state media was really concerned with enlightening young people. The only people that we had certain gurus like John Peel who would disseminate information, and the information came from the music, and people like Ian Curtis picked up on that. And then reading, obviously, books were widely available. You could go, there was, charity shops, libraries, bookshops. You could sit and read and ingest the same literature that maybe Patti Smith was looking at, Rimbaud or the French symbolists, or things like Tibetan Book of the Dead, or we're accessing all this information. Some of it was supposed to be taboo because of punk rock was, everything. It's scorched earth. It's basically
ground zero, wasn't it? You weren't allowed. All those kind of myths about Glenn Matlock being sacked because he liked the Beatles and things, wasn't it? It was that you weren't allowed to be looking back, really, were you? It was all,
And it was only recent. It wasn't like it was decades. It was a very short. Jimi Hendrix died in 1969. Brian Jones, Jim Morrison, those guys were, Syd Barrett later, but left the band and everything. There was a lot of artists who were asking the same kind of existential questions in the 60s. And of course, the drug culture had enhanced, in a good intellectual mind, the drug culture, although they didn't have guidebooks. So there was a lot of failed experiments of evolving. But some of the information that they imparted to us, I wasn't so quick to throw it out. I mean, perhaps it's growing up in North America. I moved to Canada when I was 11 years of age, and I stayed there for 5 years, and actually saw Pink Floyd in 1975.
Wow.
Before I was like 13 years of age. But then I was also a devotee of David Bowie.
These are all amazing people to have seen at that time, Ian. It feels like you were ingesting all of this stuff. The group feeling of punk, the sense of a gang, the sense of a belonging was big for you, wasn't it? The sense that you actually could have like-minded people. And on your travels, and I know you had a very kind of nomadic existence, didn't you, really? And you had a traumatic teenage years as well, and losing your mum and all these different things. Punk provided a sort of a community, didn't it, for you?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I was living in Canada at the time. I came over on a vacation in 1977 with the family. It's the first time I saw punk rockers. God Save the Queen was number one. It was blocked out in Woolworths, and I was fascinated. What's this? As a Canadian kid coming over and looking at the culture, and actually saw punks in the Liverpool area, and I was fascinated. And then I went Sex Pistols. My mother actually bought me Nevermind the Bollocks for Christmas '77.
Fair play to her, yeah.
She was trying to, being a good mom, and my father traveled a lot. He was in the Merchant Navy, so he would be able to access other cultures. He was obsessed with Van Gogh, played Paul Robeson in the house. We had a set of encyclopedias. I mean, that's all we had. We didn't have, our academia was going to like, you know, just regular schools. I mean, and always having to run the gauntlet, being the new kid at school, and assimilating to a new environment. I was either, you know, if it was in the UK, if I was in Glasgow, I was a Sassenach. If I was in, you know, Birkenhead, I was Haggis. If I was in Canada, I was Limey. And then when I came back...
What were you in Belfast, then, Ian? What were you in Belfast? Because I know you had a brief period in the city of Belfast.
I did have a brief period in Belfast. I went to the... I went over for the 1980 for the festival at Ulster Hall. Terry Hooley, Good Vibrations.
Good old Terry and Good Vibes, yeah.
It was incredible. And, you know, Outcast, Rudy, being a kid from who hadn't experienced that kind of environment, you know, a military occupying force, and then all the different sects and groups, and still there's these kids who are obsessed with music. They've got, that's our tribe. We were all, I couldn't even get dole money. I mean, I was basically scrounging.
And sleeping on floors? Were you kind of keeping on friends' floors?
Yeah, I mean, for a period, I think I did actually have a bed in Belfast. We lived off the Newtonards Road.
Oh, brilliant. Well, obviously not brilliant for you, but it's just funny to think of you there, Ian. Yeah.
Apparently they were selling for houses there for £5 because nobody wanted to live there. It was too violent. But there's always be pitch battles. You know, we used to go to the Hart Bar, and then we'd have to walk our way home, and always be something go down. You're always getting chased.
And was that security forces, or was that rival youth gangs? Because there was always a very tribal thing at that period, wasn't you? Either a Maud or a Skin or a Punk, or
No, it was both. I mean, I remember getting searched and roughed up by British paratroopers, just because they didn't like the way we looked. Threw us up against the wall. Out came the baton, you know.
Just for being punks?
Yeah. And then they heard me, and they said, "Where are you from?" And I went, even though I'm only about 20% English, I'm 80% Celt. Get my ancestors through DNA, and Welsh, Irish, Scots. And so I had kind of a transatlantic English accent, and one of the soldiers said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, you know, I was born in England. And he said, "You should go home. You don't belong here." I was like, wow. But these are my friends, my tribe. I love this music. The energy here is incredible. And it was a very difficult time. So I did get to experience some of that in Belfast, and with an occupying force and the way it was. And since I've gone back over the years, it's been exhilarating. At first, when I first went back, I was pretty nervous. I mean, the day I left, it was a controlled explosion. We had some threats in our neighborhood. Guns were pulled. Names were named. We were like, okay.
But you felt the connection with her, didn't you, as well? I mean, you say, absolutely. Your Celtic blood is a very important part of you, Ian, and you felt it, and you feel it when you come back, don't you, as well? Oh, your great-great-granny, was it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
She was born in Belfast. I'm finding all this out through, you know, the wonders of ancestry DNA. And
so we can have you for the team then? You can pull the shirt on then, Ian? I
could. At 61... I may be of some help. I played until I was 46. I actually had trials. I played for a team in Glasgow called Possum Young Men's, and that's where Kenny Dalglish came from. Wow. And one day they put us up against the team called the Showman's International, which were ex-professionals, and they kind of used them for scout games. So I was put on the field, and I was really fast, and I had a different touch. I was
a winger. Where were you playing? What position did you play in?
I was playing inside right, outside right. You know, I wasn't a number 9, but
you got to do the fancy stuff. You got to do the fancy kind of moves and things.
As best as I could, but back in the day, there was none of that. You were chopped down immediately. As soon as they saw you had a bit of speed and a little bit of hair, because I had a little bit longer hair than the kids, you were immediate target. And I remember getting my clock cleaned by one of these ex-professional guys. A proper professional take you out Norman Hunter style tackle. And I remember walking off the field in tears. It was brutal, but there was a few scouts there, one from, I believe, Nottingham Forest and Man City. But I love football so much. My grandfather took me to see Everton play when I was about 5, and just the atmosphere, the environment. I remember it was a night game, the electricity around the stadium. So that stayed in me, that stayed with me. And people say, you like sports? I say, actually, I love sports.
Yeah.
I do love sports. There's something operatic, Shakespearean about certain games.
Oh God, the drama, Ian, the drama of sport is unbeatable, isn't it? You know, at its best. At its best, it's unbeatable.
I actually played in a charity tournament with George Best.
You played with Geordie Best?
In 1994, there was a charity tournament in Los Angeles, and George Best turns up. And he had on a regular T-shirt, pair of shorts, and he had plimsolls on, like old school plimsolls. Everyone else is decked out in Adidas, Tech, Predators, Shin Guards, full uniforms. He just turns up like that. And
that's all you need when you're George Best. That's all you need, Ian.
I saw him play once at Goodison Park, 1968, 69. Again, another night game. So I remember him running down the wing and then cutting in. And his style of play and his speed and his vision, pretty profound.
And how he was expressing himself and how he, the field was his field of expression. Yeah. I saw George play as well, Ian, and it's something I'm deeply proud of to have been there and seen him as well. A special guy. Tell me about this relationship with Billy Duffy then, because we're talking decades upon decades. You must have bonded over a lot of things, sport presumably as well, because Billy's a big football man too, isn't he? So.
He is, he's in the blood, sky blue. Well,
he's Manchester Irish, isn't he? So he's got the Celtic blood as well.
Manchester City's his team. But we obviously really bonded over music. And I remember one of the first gigs that we went to, I was in Sudden Death Call, and I felt that Sudden Death Call had a limited, it was a moment, and I knew that in terms of, I wanted to do this for a long time, and I just felt there was 4 very, very strong individuals, Sudden Death Call, all alpha. Everybody had different, so we're kind of pulling in all these different directions. Plus, we were being wooed by major record labels, EMI, CBS, hundreds of thousands of pounds being thrown down. And I thought, this is all really exciting. And I've literally just got, I was on the dole. I was getting about £28 a week to live on. And, most of that went to rent. So for me, it was a lot to walk away from, but I was really passionate about evolving the creative, finding a guitar player who I was more in tune with. And when I got together with Billy, we were strained to going to see Iggy Pop at the venue in London. We were going to see Johnny Thunders. We were hanging out in clubs. We were going to Batcave. We were going to the embassy rooms. We were hanging out in all these different clubs. And it was all music. And of course, the London scene, the West End, Soho was jamming. It was pumping then, and everybody was a character. Everybody was either in a band or was a fashion designer or a photographer or had something going on. And then the kids coming in from suburbs. We lived in Brixton. Everything started in Brixton. In 1983, I came down. I left Sudden Death Call. It was very tearful. It was very difficult, but I knew something I had to do. And I just turned up at he was working in a clothing store in Kensington Market. I just walked in there. We didn't have social media. It's like you could call ahead on your cell phone.
Yeah.
I just turned up with a bag full of lyrics, about a couple of cans of beer, and probably a packet of NMC Rico or something. And I just said, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I've left the band." And he said, "You did what?" I said, "Oh, I left the band." And he goes, "You're crazy." I said, "No, I want to start a band with you." And he's like, "What?" And he was already working with Abo from KDK. So I basically, he said, well, you can stay at my place. So I was sleeping on his couch for a minute. But we were writing songs. We were getting records out, playing records. All we did was we didn't have much money for food, but we'd sit around, we'd smoke cigarettes. We'd listen to records over and over and over again and talk. Then we started going out to shows, and we saw this band called Ritual play in Brixton. And immediately we thought the bass player, well, he's actually a rhythm guitar player, Jamie. So, wow, he'd be incredible. And the drummer's really cool as well. The drummer was the son of a diplomat from Sierra Leone, and he looked stunning, beautiful looking guy, but he couldn't play a straight beat. So our first initial shows were with Ray, and then we ended up with Nigel Preston on drums, who was also played in Theatre of Fate, Billy. And that was a really tight unit, but to maintain a band in that environment, very difficult. And I think if you see most bands, many bands, unless they grew up together like U2 or something like that, bands were fracturing left, right, and center. And MTV was nascently coming in, and it was affecting the format of the way people made music. And we'd gone to America very early on as a band in 1984. So, 6th Avenue, 57 Chevy, going to see, man, we played the Danceteria.
Wow. It's a long way from the Newton Ards Road, Ian, I'll say that.
It's a hell of a long way from Newton Ards Road. But I knew how to navigate myself around that environment. And so I did pretty good in people saying New York's dangerous. I'm like, please.
You've done Belfast. You've done Liverpool on a Friday night.
I've done Glasgow on a Friday night. I mean, Saturday night. Heavy baptism of fire for a kid who's really earnest. And honestly, I wasn't a scrapper. I later got into scraps, especially around the band. But then my father was an amateur boxer as well, so I could put my hands up. But I never was drawn to violence, or I always found it really repellent and repulsive. But we did have cocktails. We did definitely enjoy libations.
You know what, Ian? It is some story, and it just feels like the right time, I think, to celebrate that period of Death Cult and moving on into the cult as well. Telegraph Buildings in Belfast on the 6th of November. It's going to be a magical night, and hopefully you get that little spark of passion when you come back into the city of Belfast again, because it never really leaves you, does it? No. Once the experiences I had, I can only speak for my own experiences, but once I had those experiences, they're in me. That's part of my DNA now. And knowing I have family from that area as well, there's definitely connection. When we play Belfast, it's always instantly, there's an instant familiarity. And there's always a great sense of anticipation in the room. The buzz is going to be massive for this gig.
Yeah.
Ian, we've been beaten by time, but I'm delighted to be able to have this chat with you, and we're looking forward to your return to Belfast.
Thank you, brother.
And it's going to be great, man. Death Cult, Belfast, 6th of November. A chance to celebrate something very special indeed. Ian Astbury, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, mate.
Thank you so much. Take care.